They were first to launch a satellite, first to send a man to space, first to walk in the void. But when it came to putting boots on the moon, the Soviet Union fell silent. What happened? Why, after dominating the early space race, did the USSR suddenly vanish from lunar history? In this episode of Lost History of Space, we uncover the buried story of the Soviet moon landing that almost beat Apollo 11. It's a tale of secret launches, deadly explosions, political paranoia, and a rocket so powerful it could have changed history if it hadn't torn itself apart. While America celebrated the Mercury and Gemini programs, the Soviets were secretly building something much bigger, the N1L3 lunar program, designed to send cosmonauts to the moon by 1969. And not just for exploration. Declassified memos reveal the goal wasn't scientific, it was strategic. The moon was to be a Cold War trophy. Nikita Khrushchev wanted a Soviet flag planted before any American could step foot there. It was a political weapon. But to get there, they needed a miracle. Enter the N1 rocket. A behemoth rivaling NASA's Saturn V, it stood over 100 meters tall and packed 30 engines into its first stage. But while the Saturn V was tested, refined, and built with staggering budgets and redundancy, the N1 was rushed. Soviet engineers were forced to design in secret, often relying on guesswork, because the Kremlin wanted plausible deniability. If it failed, it could be buried, and it was. The N1 launched 4 times. All 4 ended in disaster. But it was the second launch, in July 1969, that truly rewrote the timeline. Just days before Apollo 11 lifted off, the Soviets attempted a moonshot of their own. It exploded seconds after takeoff, destroying its launch pad in one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in human history. The blast was so massive it registered on US military satellites. But the Soviet press never acknowledged it. The program was plagued with technical chaos. The engines were never test-fired as a unit. Designers had to rely on ground simulations and crossed fingers. There were no unmanned test flights of the full stack. Every launch was do or die. Cosmonauts trained for a moon landing that was never going to happen. Some reportedly refused to board the L3 capsule after witnessing the state of the program. Meanwhile, America was broadcasting its victories live on TV. But the USSR didn't give up easily. In 1971, they prepared for N1 launch number 3. It cleared the tower, barely, before tumbling and detonating at high altitude. The final attempt in 1972 ended much the same. After that, the entire project was cancelled, buried under layers of classified documentation. It wasn't until the 1990s that most of the truth came out. The N1 blueprints, recovered interviews, and satellite images revealed the scale of the ambition and the failure. Behind the scenes, the political pressure was immense. Soviet leaders feared international embarrassment, so failures were never made public. Engineers worked under brutal timelines with minimal funding. Many innovations were reused from earlier, less capable vehicles. Critical testing was skipped, and bureaucratic infighting made collaboration nearly impossible. Each launch was a gamble of human lives and political credibility. The cosmonauts chosen for the moon missions, like Alexei Leonov, the first human to walk in space, were national heroes. They spent years preparing in isolation, simulating lunar landings in remote deserts, rehearsing emergency drills, and watching each N1 explosion with growing dread. Some began to doubt the mission would ever happen. Others kept diaries that wouldn't be published until decades later, revealing the crushing disappointment of dreams denied. Why does this story matter? Because history is written by the winners. And in this case, it was rewritten by omission. The Soviet Union never admitted it had tried to land on the moon. Western media assumed they had simply given up. But in truth, they came shockingly close. Had that second N1 launch succeeded, the USSR could have planted a red flag on the moon weeks, maybe days, before Neil Armstrong. Imagine how that would have changed the world. Would the Cold War have intensified? Would NASA have lost public funding? Would the US have launched a military base in response? The butterfly effect of a Soviet lunar victory is impossible to fully measure. But one thing is certain. The race was far closer than we were ever told. There are darker layers too. Some accounts suggest a cosmonaut died in one of the N1 disasters, scrubbed from the record, his identity erased. There are disputed audio recordings, known as the lost cosmonaut tapes, that allegedly capture a Soviet crew burning up during re-entry or suffocating on a failed orbital flight. These remain controversial, but they speak to a deeper truth. The USSR would rather bury its dead than admit defeat. The Soviets did eventually succeed in robotic exploration. The lunar program returned samples. Rovers like Lunokhod 1 proved the moon could be explored remotely, but it wasn't the same. The glory of a manned landing, the geopolitical triumph, that was lost. The Soviet moon dream died quietly, smothered by secrecy and sabotage. Today, remnants of the N1 program sit rusting in forgotten hangars. The surviving L3 lander never touched space. Most people don't even know it existed. But now you do. And the next time you see that iconic footage of Apollo 11, remember, there was another path, another timeline, where a different boot touched down first. This is not an alternate history. This is the history that was hidden. This is the Soviet moon landing that almost changed everything. And in the vacuum of silence left by the Soviet collapse, private researchers, journalists, and former engineers began to speak out. Old mission logs were leaked. Diagrams of the L3 lander surfaced. Even partial video footage of the N1 launch failures began to appear online. Enthusiasts and historians have since pieced together what the Kremlin tried to erase. We now know the full plan. The N1 would launch a two-person crew. One would remain in lunar orbit, while the other descended to the surface. There were even designs for a Soviet lunar rover to expand surface mobility. It was all real, just never completed. Today, we look back with fascination, not fear. The Cold War is over. The moon is quiet. But the story of how close we came to a Soviet moon landing remains a powerful reminder of how history is shaped, not just by achievement, but by who gets to tell the story. The Soviet cosmonauts who trained for the moon are mostly gone now. Their dream was denied. But their story deserves to be remembered, because in the end, this isn't just about space. It's about secrecy, sacrifice, ambition, and failure. It's about the fragility of grand dreams and the courage of those who chase them. The Soviet moon program was buried under politics and pressure, but it almost changed everything.